encourage residents of Wayland and anyone else who may access this library to respect, treasure, and protect the rights of all people to live in dignity, freedom, and peace. We endeavor to further this mission with each program while bringing awareness, broadening perspectives, understanding, and engaging you in conversation. We warmly welcome you here in person and online to the 16th Gossels Fund for Human Dignity program.
So we're honored to have Callie Crossley here today and Dan Kennedy. Callie Crossley hosts the radio show and podcast Under the Radar with Callie Crossley and shares radio essays each Monday on GBH's Morning Edition. She's co-host of GBH's radio program, The Culture Show, which focuses on local and national cultural trends and perspectives. In addition, she offers cultural commentary on GBH's evening news program, Greater Boston, and on Boston Public Radio, GBH's weekly talk show. Callie has been a substitute host for the national podcast Body Politic and is a frequent commentator on local and national television and radio. She's won multiple TV, radio, and film awards, including the prestigious Gold Baton DuPont Columbia Award and an Academy Award Oscar nomination for her producer work on the documentary series Eyes on the Prize, America's Civil Rights Years. She's the first African American to be nominated in the documentary feature category. She has also earned top honors for both her GBH Boston commentary and her hosting interviewing skills, including local and national Emmys and awards from the Associated Press, Edward R. Murrow, Clarion, and the Public Media Journalists Association. Callie is a former producer for ABC News 2020 and a former visiting fellow of the Council of Independent Colleges, formerly the Woodrow Wilson Visiting Fellow. Please help me welcome Callie Crossley. And on my right, I have Dan Kennedy. So Dan is a professor of journalism in the College of Arts, Media, and Design and a nationally known media commentator. Professor Kennedy teaches news reporting, opinion writing, media ethics, and other journalism courses with an emphasis on how technology is changing the business of news. He has also been published in the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Nyman Lab, Nyman Reports, Pointer Online, and other venues. Dan's most recent book, co-authored with Ellen Clegg, is called What Works in Community News, Media Startups, News Deserts, and the Future of the Fourth Estate, and was recently published by Beacon Press. He and Clegg are a retired editorial page editor of the Boston Globe and also the co-hosts of a School of Journalism podcast called What Works, that features interviews with leaders in the reinvention of community journalism. From its debut in 1998 until its cancellation in 2021, Kennedy was a regular panelist on Beat the Press, the award-winning weekly media program on GBH TV Channel 2, which also featured Callie Crossley, in addition to Emily Rooney and John Kelly. Just as an aside for me, I know and many others, Beat the Press on Friday evenings at 7 p.m. was much must-watch TV. One note, I just want to let those at home, and I believe we have a number of people joining us via Zoom. You can post your questions in the chat, and Courtney will be helping to purvey or give those questions to our speakers at the Q&A portion of the program. So please post your questions on the chat. Now please help me welcome Callie Crossley and Dan Kennedy in the program we're calling Breaking Down the Silos.
Thank you. It's always fun to be with Callie. She has been a guest speaker in my classes several times. I'm guessing you'll be getting her on the next meeting. I thought we would go for about half an hour. We could go all day, but we'd go for about a half an hour, and then we'd love to hear what's on your mind. So Callie, I'd like to begin by setting the scene here in Wayland. 2 years ago, Gannett, the largest newspaper chain in the country, shut down a number of weekly papers in the Boston suburbs, including the Wayland Town Crier. Today, there's a website called Wayland E-News, which, as I understand it, is a volunteer project. I've looked at it. They post announcements from local and good for them. They deserve a lot of credit. That's a lot of work. There's a patch, which again is mostly announcements from work in nearby communities. What Wayland lacks is a news organization with reporters, paid or volunteer, who go out and cover local government, housing and development, the neighborhoods, and the civic life of the community. So what effects can we point to when a community lacks a reliable source of news and information?
There we go. We're back in business. I mean, I think the immediate effect is by the time communities get information that is vitally important, we're in the fourth stage, if you will. You're minding your business, going on, taking care of life as you know it, and then suddenly somebody says, why are they tearing down the school? What? When was the discussion? Who knew they were tearing it down? I'm reminded in my own community of Cambridge, up toward Porter Square, if anybody's been up there, they instituted a lot of bike lanes. Now listen, bikers, I'm all about you. I'm great. I want us to move in that direction. But there's a lot of mom and pop shops up there, and they just have completely removed all the parking. And it turns out there wasn't, because I was thinking, I must have been out of it. No, there wasn't much conversation about it. Yes, there was in the city council meetings. They swore up and down, they kept bringing it up. But in the end, the people that most need to know about it, those of us who go to Porter Square, and those of us who work in Porter Square, and those businesses, did not have an understanding that the bike lanes were going to be so intrusive that it would be impossible for people to park. It's all right if I have to go 2 or 3 blocks because we're trying to achieve something larger. But the fact that I can't park at all anywhere, it's ridiculous. So that's what ends up happening. You just don't know until the end. And then usually it's too late to have the impact that you want to have. Have there been many, many discussions, many articles about it, a lot of people online and elsewhere complaining about what happened in Cambridge? Yes. Did it change anything? Not really, because we were already down the tracks with the plans by the time, most folks really locked into what was happening. So that's the biggest issue for me. Also, sometimes it's just the simple things. I drive up and down Western Avenue. That's not really my neighborhood, but it's sort of in the place where I'm going to GBH. And they were building something, and I'm like, well, what is that? You could not find it anywhere because it's not a story that the Globe was necessarily going to cover. It didn't have any huge meaning to them, like it wasn't a white stadium, okay? It wasn't TD Garden. It was just something that was being built there, but what? And where do you go to find that information? And then all of a sudden you realize I'm going online or I'm asking people or I'm trying to figure it out, and it's very difficult. So occasionally I've really rolled up on a construction worker. What is this? Because that's the only way you can figure out what's happening. So to me, from large issues and small, you just don't know what's going on. And ignorance is really not bliss.
Everybody has to be their own reporter. Go
Yeah.
ask the construction worker what they're doing. There's also been a number of studies done in recent years that try to document the effects of news deserts. And among them are voter turnout goes down, fewer people run for office. And Wayland's a small town, so you don't have a mayor. But in places where there are cities, people can generally figure out who they want to vote for mayor, but they don't know who to vote for city council or school committee or any of that. One of the favorite findings that Ellen and I like to talk about is what we call the corruption tax. And that is, if a community has to borrow money in order to build a new middle school or a fire station or whatever, they end up having to pay a higher interest rate than they would if there were a reliable source of news in town. And essentially what's going on is that the people who are lending the money want to have their money protected. And they know that there's nobody keeping an eye on how their money's being spent, so they're going to charge a little bit more interest. Now, your GBH radio program, Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, often features reporters from local news outlets. I'm wondering what you've learned from them that we just can't get from large outlets like the Boston Globe, the city's television stations, and the two big public radio stations, GBH and WBUR.
Well, often it's just what I said, all those little stories that I don't know about. The other piece of it, though, is even with some of the large stories that we think we do know about, let's talk about White Stadium, of which I know not much about, except there were many complaints and pushbacks from the community. You see the buildup in those small outlets. You hear from the community folk who are raising issues likely not to be paid attention to early on. Like somebody saying, okay, now wait a minute. I believe this is an issue for White Stadium. All right, we want to have the new, is it the soccer or the other people there? I can't remember the teams. You know, I'm not a very big sports person.
Women's professional soccer.
Thank you, right, okay. Except for March Madness, go Gamecocks. But, but anyway, but there was an issue about what happens to the local teams then. Where do they play? What happens and where do folks park and how does this all happen? These are questions that can only come from the folks living in the community, and the people up here, to your point, are thinking about the larger gain of having a White Stadium and a great soccer team. We want to have that. This is great for Boston. But are we talking about these other concerns down here that don't often get talked about? So that's what you get in these small outlets, news outlets that are either online or not. I mean, I love Universal Hub. Universal Hub, if you don't know about it, Adam's last name?
Adam Gaffin,
Yeah,
universalhub.com. If
Yeah.
you've never seen it, you should check it out.
He covers everything, and people turn in issues to him. So the small thing about who smacked somebody on the subway line to, other issues like what are they building on Western Avenue, all of that stuff. It's just a broad, stroke of everything that's going in all across various communities. So sometimes you can sort of sort through there and find yourself. There's a new app now with not quite as hyperlocal, but somewhat, called Newsbreak. Have you seen that, Dan?
Yeah, we could talk about
Okay, all right. Okay, well, all I know is that there will have stories in there that they may be pilfering from other places that you might not see in one place. So if you were sort of looking to see, well, is there something going on in Wayland I don't know about, they might have it because they sort of cull for locals. They're specifically looking for small local stories to put in their space, in the region. So that's their focus. And so there's an advantage to that, being able to go to a place where you think you might have a shot of finding out some other things. So that's what we try to cover in that. I always say that I'm also looking for those perspectives that don't necessarily get included in the what do they call, treetop stories, the looking down stories. So there's always perspectives over here. Maybe some are legitimate, air quotes. Maybe some aren't, but interesting. So let's have a fuller understanding of, what is that issue or what may not be an issue. I'm thinking now about Siddiqui Kambone. That may be a name you know. He's a pretty well-known activist down around Roxbury. And, he's been yelling for years about this should be named Nubian Square. okay, well, it happened. But before we got to Nubian Square being called Nubian Square, because it used to be Dudley, as you know, a lot of people said, well, why couldn't it be the name of somebody else from this area? Could have been, but that's not a perspective I necessarily heard elsewhere, but we had that discussion on the show. You can go either way, but good to know the whole spectrum of what people are thinking about around these issues. So I think that's what we try to bring to the table always, just what may not have, what is still under the radar, if I may.
Now, one of the questions that our hosts are concerned about is the rise of news and information silos. Now, in a number of communities that have lost their local news outlet, people are trying to fill the gap with Facebook groups, Nextdoor, and the like. That's certainly been the case in Medford, where I live. And yes, there is a siloing effect. There are groups for progressives, groups for conservatives, groups for different interest areas. How does that affect our community? And how does that affect our sense of community? And is there an argument to be made that it's actually a force for good because it fosters diversity of thought?
Okay, there are a lot of questions there. You're going to have to remind me of some. Okay. I also am probably going to bore you a little bit, all of you, because yesterday I was at an incredible summit at Wellesley College. And it was the kickoff for the Hillary Rodham Clinton Center for Citizenship, Leadership, and Democracy. And the panelists included, just to say, 2 Nobel laureates. That's just to begin. And there were all these other people. With so much information, my mind is exploding. So I have some that I'm going to quote to you now because it was just mind-boggling, because we talked a lot about connecting community and citizenship. That's part of the whole reason for the discussion on the campus. By the way, just so you have a sense of what the center is, it's not for all these necessarily pointy heads and eggheads to return and suck up space on the campus. Some will over time, but it's for a program focused on the sophomores at Wellesley. So all the sophomores, they can opt out if they wish to, but it's focused on them to really reintroduce them if they need to be reintroduced to the importance of civic engagement. And of course, Wellesley is about leadership anyway, so we're talking about community leadership and connection. And there are all kinds of incredible, we did a pilot, programs and exercises for them throughout the year. The 30 students who were in the pilot came away so excited about it and really ready to do it. The underpinning of all of that, this is why I'm getting to your question, is about how to talk across difference. You may know that on college campuses there's a lot of not talking across difference. So there is that. And that's to say, even though the summit yesterday was, there were a big protest outside, a loud one throughout the whole day, and a very intense one directed at former Secretary Clinton during the day because people disagreed with her policy about Palestine and Gaza. So just wanted you to know that that was the context of it. And inside, we're talking about instituting this program about how to talk about difference. So with that in mind, so you know why these people were there and what they were talking about, one of the Nobel laureates is Maria Ressa. Do people know that name? Yeah. In 2021, she won the Nobel Peace Prize with Dmitry, what's the guy, the Russian journalist last name? Okay, it's escaping me. Anyway, the two of them won it together for their various approaches to trying to wrench back the agency for those of us who can get truth from journalism. She's a Filipino-American journalist, used to work for CNN 100 years ago, wrote intensively and did investigations about terrorism and how it rises and how people get separated from each other and polarization and all of that kind of stuff. Really incredible work that led to her being awarded this prize in 2021, but she has her own media organization now, which she says focuses on slow reaction. You know, you've heard that sort of slow, what's the thing of slow eating, slow, you just take a moment. So as she made clear, and I think part of this is in her speech, her Nobel Prize speech, but she made clear that part of what's happening is that there is such immediate reaction to whatever's out there, and social media drives this. Her note to all of us is that polarization is the byproduct of the design of tech, meaning it's deliberately and intentionally designed to pit people against each other and to get an immediate response. By the way, we had somebody on the panel who was high up at Facebook, so she wasn't just talking in the air. But here's the statement that she made that we all had to just pause. If you don't have the facts, there is no truth. If you don't have truth, there is no trust. And if there is no trust, ding, 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 here's the point. There is no shared reality. And if you have no shared reality, guess what you don't have? Community. So you gotta first make sure that we are finding and supporting the truth that is reported. We'll have more discussion about that so that we can build trust. You all know that we're not very well trusted these days, we journalists, but there's gotta be some trust there. So then we can all share in a reality so that we can begin, if we are going to have discussions across difference, this is what we need to do. When I talk to college students about media literacy, one of the things I say to them, we can look out the window and see trees. So it's important that I say, I see a tree, and you tell me you see a tree. We both see the tree, right? Now, we can have discussions about whether or not there should be trees, whether or not we like trees, whether or not there is a purpose for trees or not. But let's begin with we both see the tree. See, the problem is a lot of people will tell you there are no trees. And that's where we are. And they will insist that there are no trees. And the fact that you see them means that you're off somewhere. And so that's what we're struggling with in trying to make sure that we can defeat polarization in some way. The other thing that Maria Ressa said is, in the pitting and the polarization, this was really quite shocking. So let's say you're sort of middle somewhere. You're middle. You're not really left or right. Because everything is a this or a that or a yes or a no or this group or that group in the way that it's presented, mostly through a lot of technology and social media. People who are sort of middle right go hard right. People who are sort of middle left go hard left. And it's really hard to get them back. So these are some of the circumstances of the environment that we're talking about. All right, so what happens then if we have a number of groups that we have outlined there? I think probably presenting us with some interesting perspectives and information, probably not that was covered or we could find elsewhere. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but what you don't want to have is that people saying, I'm the only news, the only information that you need to consider as you consider whatever issue you're thinking about. So what now we're left with is that you really, if you want to feel like you're in a communal space and really understand, you have to really seek various sources. It's important to do that so that you can say, oh, all right, well, we know the story is the trees. Well, let's see what various people have to say. What do the progressives say about the trees? What are the conservatives saying about the trees? What are the black folks saying about the trees? All of these other constituencies that'll actually bring you, if done well, assuming nobody in there is just going off, a richer understanding of the whole issue about the trees to begin with. Now, would it be nice if we could all have it in one place? Yes, it would. But it's increasingly become clear that it's difficult to do. And those institutions that are attempting to do that, though we're all human, the New York Times and the Washington Post and all, and the public media, y'all don't trust. You just don't trust that we're giving it to you, giving all of it to you. So we're in kind of a muddle here, trying to figure out how to defeat that polarization and still have a communal experience where you can appreciate others' experiences and perspectives, but all have a shared reality. Does that make you're free to tell me you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. You always tell me so.
We'll save that for the question.
Okay.
Actually, your answer was so much better than my question that I'm going to move on here.
Okay.
But I will say that what we're dealing with in Medford with the Facebook groups is Medford has a reputation for being pretty sharp elbows when it comes to local politics, and yet I have found that people are pretty well behaved on the Facebook groups. The problem is it's all questions. Does anybody know what's going on? Have you heard about this? What's going on with that? And then you get Nextdoor, which I'll give Nextdoor credit for, is absolutely the news source of record for missing cats.
Or where to go get your clothes cleaned. Come on now.
Yeah. So, given that we all agree that every community needs a reliable source of local news, what do you think can be done to meet that need? Is there a sustainable revenue model? As you might imagine, I have some thoughts as well.
Yes. You probably can answer that better than me. I don't know what the revenue model is. Here's what I know. Those people who are out there doing it, I'll go back to my hometown community right now, Cambridge Day. It's really a one-guy operation. He does a great job. You were talking about elections and people not knowing who's running and all the details. Oh my God, if he wasn't there, I don't know what. I think he definitely presents information that if you want it, it's there for you. And some of the other stories we're talking about, you can usually find it there. But like everybody else, even though he's, he thought of it himself and has been doing it himself, it's been tough. So there a small committee formed. This is a communal response, realizing we can't let this guy go out because he was saying, I think it's over for me. I don't think I have the revenue sources. So there was a big fundraiser. It's ongoing. If you go online now, something will pop up. But certainly I, gave money. I want to see this continue. And so we have to decide that we are going to support what we believe is important. This is going to sound off, but I'm an inactive member of my sorority at this moment, but I pay my dues. I just keep my dues up because I want the organization to keep going. Also, I want to be able to talk when I want to, but which is same thing with news sources. So you want to make sure that they're around, and this is work, and it costs a lot of money, even at the very hyper local that I know you know the stats better than I could ever share here. So we've got to make a determination that if it's something that we know is important, that it's important to support these sources, we've got to support it. Our buddy that used to be on Beat the Press, Mark,
Mark Jerkowitz.
Mark
Yes.
Jerkowitz bought a newspaper in North Carolina, I think.
Yes, in the islands of North Carolina, and he did it for quite a few years.
Yes.
I believe he got out and went back to Washington, but he did that for a long time.
But that was all about, again, he was reviving a paper a local paper that almost went out, and it was a lot of work, just to get the funding for that. But you got to make people understand it's really important. Yeah.
I'm going to add to that because I know there's a lot of concern in this community about having local news. There are a number of different ways you could go. And what I would suggest is that you look at either the slow build or the fast build. And the slow build might be taking what you've already got, which is this Wayland e-News, which I was looking it over and it looks pretty good. But if there was any way of finding a volunteer or two who was willing to actually go out and cover select board meetings, school board meetings, things like that, that would be kind of a next step. And one of the projects that we look at in our book is the Bedford Citizen, which is not very far from here. That started with 3 volunteers who just went out and started covering everything. And that's not sustainable for the long run, obviously, but over time, they were able to bring in a fundraising component. And today, 10 years later, they have a full-time paid editor, part-time paid reporter, and paid freelancers. So that's kind of a slow build. The fast build, and we've seen this in a number of communities in Greater Boston, especially over the last couple of years, you form a group that figures out how are we going to raise a substantial amount of money in order to start a nonprofit news organization. Now, my research partner, Ellen Clegg, is the co-founder of one in Brookline, Brookline.News. And they got big very quickly. They actually hired a reporter from Politico to be their first editor. And they're doing a terrific job, and it's because they were able to raise a fairly substantial amount of money fairly quickly. So it can be done. I mean, Ellen and I fundamentally are just very optimistic about the future of local news. Unfortunately, it's easier to do it in a community like Wayne, we found, than in rural communities and in urban communities of color. But fortunately for you, you're kind of in the sweet spot.
Also, the New Bedford Citizen has broken stories. I mean, that's an industry thing for us, but it also for the community, all this information that they were able to cover around fishermen and something. So I can't remember all the big stories they broke.
Well, the New Bedford Light is, they're almost in a category of their own. I don't talk about them much because when they launched it was so big and so well funded that I don't know that it really has a lot of lessons for other communities, but it is terrific. It's absolutely wonderful.
And most recently, both the papers on Martha's Vineyard, this is of great concern to me because I freeload there during the summer, so I like to read both papers, were shaky because they lost editors and they lost publishers, and through some people that we both know, Dan, and really a local businessman who said, we cannot afford to let this go, and a lot of community support. They're back on their feet now with some great people. Now, the sad story is, if you are aware of this, we are, of course, so many really fine reporters have lost jobs. Really, even in the last 2 months, the numbers are scary. So there's a lot of folk out in the marketplace available, actually, to do good work in these small communities with a lot of experience. That's the good news. So both of the Times and the Gazette were able to tap into some folks with a lot of experience who were available because of the unfortunate situation writ large. But there we have a community that's going to have really good information.
Well, we could keep going, but we are at the point where I'd really like to turn it over to the audience and see what's on your mind. So I don't know who's facilitating that, but...
Looks like Amy.
Ah, okay. Excellent.
That's on.
Working now.
Do we have a question?
Good morning, and thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. I just want to say, my name is Dominique. I'm a registered nurse that is also a plaintiff in federal court in the state of Colorado. Also, I'm a biblical activist in the cannabis industry. And so I've been moving around. I've been living in the Concord, Massachusetts area, and I've been just assessing, community and what you were talking about is as far as lack in information and what people know and what they don't know. What I've observed is just as an outsider is that people are afraid of knowing something other than what they are told. We are living in fear. And it has been so powerful that it has limited what type of information has been told to a group of people. And I'm looking at this community, and you guys are elderly, and I'm a registered nurse. There's not enough nurses or baby formula or going to be enough sunscreen for the behavior of not really going out of your way to know the truth about information, especially at a time like this. We have earthquakes on the East Coast and fallen bridges. People are exhausted and tired. So I want to know, what can I do to encourage people to be brave? Because there's real truthful information, like what's going on with the Board of Nursing, what nurses are taking the fentanyl, where is that really going? This is real. People don't know about this. People don't know about the truth because they want to feed you fear. We've been given answers. I'm a believer. I love Jesus. And he gives us a key, but even that has been used in a way that's been perverted. We're at a time right now where we're looking at our third world war. So I'm asking, not just, I'm speaking, but I'm also asking you, like, I think you said there was one person that was out there going hard. I make a lot of noise with just a little bit. What can I do to help people be brave? What can I share?
Well, there's a few things. So we're, in this conversation, we've sort of, without maybe saying specifically, talked about both civic and media literacy. They're two different things, but they overlap. So with the civic leadership, much of what we've discussed thus far is about making certain that you understand what's happening in your community and being participatory. All right, so people have to kind of come out of their own individual silo. And by the way, this is tough right now. As one of the speakers said yesterday, COVID really broke the we and the us. I thought that was a profound statement in ways that we are still trying to cope with. And if I look at my own interactions, there are actually people I haven't seen in 6 years, people I know quite well, just because of what happened with COVID. So we have to, several things are happening at once. People are trying to move out of that space, and that was one of fear, appropriate fear. That was a global pandemic. To try to figure out how they can put themselves now physically, in person, in real life, as the kids say, IRL, in scenarios that are embedded in their community. Like, who's gonna man the polls? That sounds simple, but as we know, we've lost so many people because of fear. People don't want to be in the, who's going to go to the meetings and tell us what's happening, as Dan said. If you don't know what's being decided in your name, then you find out too late. So all of these kinds of civic activities are available, and they're absolutely critical at this point in order for us to be able to function. Now, let me go to the media literacy. It's real, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, it's real confusing out here now. So it requires a lot of effort. And sometimes we just don't feel like all that effort. It used to be, you could assume that at least more than half of what you got was absolutely true. Now I'm saying to you, you have got to know the source. You have got to check the source. And sometimes the source, as good as it is, because these are run by humans, that's what you want to make sure they are run by humans, by the way. Because if it's not, then right away, you move away from that, okay? So that's really important. You've got to make certain that in your own space, you know where you may be ideologically, and then move to the other side to hear. Nina Totenberg spoke at the Kennedy School the other night, Friday night. She was receiving an award, and she said, it's really something, and it teaches you a lot when Nina Totenberg, by the way, is a lead and very esteemed journalist at NPR who covers the Supreme Court. If you've never heard her reports, she is very detailed, been doing it for years, so she really knows it. So she says, you go in, you figure, I've been doing this 30 years, I was in the court, so I'm listening to them. I have a pretty good sense of what's going to be. I'm reading along. This, I'm telling you what she said. And then she says, I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. This is a really good argument. Not one I thought of. oh, this one's really good. So the point is, you may not assume. Even if you come with a lot of gravitas, as she does, you may not assume, because you just do not know. So you have to go to the sources, pay attention, be open to the fact that there's maybe something that rattles your cage that looks completely differently, and then try to figure out how to assess that in your own space. When I talk to college students, I'm always trying to get them to move someplace else to think about it, because, again, going back to my summit yesterday, here's what's happened on social media. The way they built the growth, which was intentional, was to say, oh, you like this, tell your friend Dan. Now tell your friend Callie. Now we have a little cluster of what you like. Right. So what you like, probably Dan likes, probably Callie likes. Now we have a cluster, but we all like the same thing. So I don't know what you like in your cluster, or your friend, or Amy, or Chris, right? So now we have all these clusters that are by themselves, where people have figured out they think that this is the only way and possibly the only argument, as Nina was saying. And it is really comfortable to be in your cluster. Although I had to tell one of my friends one day, she insisted to me on a national story. I'm sorry, I don't remember what it was. It would be a better story if I could. But she said to me, well, that's not true because Amy's mother told me. And I said, well, God, because I'm thinking, I overlooked something. Where did Amy's mother get it? What did she? She said, oh, no, Amy's mother. She said, I don't know where she gets it. She just knows. I said, no. No, Amy's mother does not know. Don't tell me that. So, but my point is that we rely, or we get to the point, or we have gotten to the point often that whoever's in our little group has got to be telling us the only truth, capital T, and we're not prepared to hear something else. And that's really the only way where you can be expansive about it. So to your point about people don't know, no, they don't know, because there's a lot of energy it's going to take for you to decide, all right, I'm just not going to read this one thing or listen to this one place. I'm going to go here and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to try to figure out, where I am after I hear all these other perspectives. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work if nobody's covering these things for you, that you can rely on to go figure out, go ask the construction worker what's going on. That's a lot of work. And so we have to determine whether or not this is important for us. And yes, it is important because it really does have to do with our democracy. This is the foundation of our democracy, is all of this civic activity, which is too often probably based on the media activity of which we are not understanding or being bamboozled by. So I can tell you, just like sometimes you're reading the stuff online and you could swear it definitely is the American Medical Association, and then you find out, no, that wasn't right because it wasn't spelled right or whatever. There's a lot of that going on. And you just have to pay attention, and you have to want to put the energy into it. The more people that do it, the better we all benefit from.
Well, I would love to share the energy and the information later.
I'm going to tell Amy's mother what you said.
Yes.
Hi, sorry. My name is Chris. I want to thank you both for being here. Callie, very interesting to hear your perspective on things, and Dan, all your work on local newspapers is very valuable. And in fact, I'm here with a couple of people who are thinking about starting something here in Wayland. So if anybody wants to talk about it later, come see us. But my question is, when I was younger, or when many of you were younger, there were lots of independent newspapers in this country. Wayland had a newspaper. All the communities around Boston had their own newspapers. What, from your perspective, went wrong? I mean, I have my own theories about what went wrong, but why are we in this situation where communities have to start all over again to find their spirit of journalism, spirit of community to try and rebuild that? What went wrong from your perspective? And then I'm wondering, there are a number of models now that are emerging that we see in the Boston area, and they're probably emerging all over the country. They all have little slight differences. Some are more community-oriented, some are more nonprofit-oriented, some are even producing publications in print. In Concord, which is very close to us, right as we meet today, they have a newspaper that is almost entirely in print. It exists online as well, but it's an actual newspaper you hold in your hand and you get ink stains from. What are your thoughts on that as a possible solution for the future?
Okay, well, I would say that the fundamental argument that Ellen and I make in our book is that really three things went wrong with local news. First of all, Craigslist came along and took away all the classified ads, like overnight. And there went 40% of a typical newspaper's revenues. I worked at the Boston Phoenix for many years, and we were filled with classifieds. It was, we need a bass player, I need a roommate, I want a girlfriend, and all that was just gone. Google and Facebook came along and took most of what was left. Advertising did not survive the transition from print to digital. It is very little value to it. But one of the things that Ellen and I have focused on is that even with all that, there's still money coming in, and there's enough to really make a go of it if you're not taking that money and shipping all of it out of state to corporate chain owners and hedge fund owners. So that really is the crux of why we're seeing so many of these startups. Now, I have to say, most of them are nonprofit. There isn't much in the way of for-profit startups these days because you're dependent on getting people to pay for the product and advertising, and those are two things that are very difficult. The nonprofit space is actually easier in some ways. You can get membership donations, you can get large gifts. You were asking about print. I think the reason some of these projects have print editions is because, I know this was true in Marblehead, for instance. They have a nonprofit called the Marblehead Current. They were not planning to do a print edition. And a large donor came forward and says, I will fund you, but I want a print edition. So they said, well, I guess we're going to do a print edition. Now, it's good in terms of visibility, because if you're a new digital-only project, it's difficult to get known about. I mentioned the Bedford Citizen earlier. They're now very well known, but it took them 10 or 12 years. The other thing about print is that if you have a print paper, you can get public notices, which is a source of revenue. And then you have to do the calculation as to whether the revenue that you're going to get from public notices is going to be greater than what you're going to be spending on printing and distribution. But that's an important consideration as well. There are some proposals to make changes to the public notices law so that at least in areas where there's no viable print paper, a digital publication would be able to run those public notices, and the town would be able to fulfill the legal requirements. So, I mean, fundamentally, that's what it is. But in a larger sense, Callie was talking about this a few minutes ago, I think we've kind of lost the talent for civic engagement. And I do believe that a successful local news project that starts up today has to spend as much time on re-educating the public about the importance of this stuff as they do into just covering it. And you can do that with events, you can do it just by being visible everywhere in the community, and that's worked very well in a few places. I wish it were working everywhere, but at least in some places it's working very well.
I would also add that at the same time that you're explaining to people, why this is needed, we all of us in our various roles, you as a community and we as journalism, have to keep defining what democracy is. We keep talking about how it's really at stake in this moment. It is, but people hear the word democracy and they kind of sort of know what we're talking about. But I think it's incumbent upon journalists to define it at the level of community. What that means is you might not have a polling place here, or you might have one. What that means is you have the ability to go to your school community and make this decision. What that means is, so similar to, I was thinking about this the other day, now we automatically say Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, because we define it all the time. We have to figure out various ways to constantly define what is democracy, of which everybody is saying is at stake, in terms that are, as Danielle Allen said yesterday, the norms of everyday life. That we have to perform the norms of democratic activity and civic activity every day and talk about it in ways that people can say, oh, okay, oh, now I understand. Because sometimes it just feels like, we're all in a pointy head space where we're just nattering on about something that people don't feel like they have a grasp of, that there is no consequence to them and no benefit. So if nothing else, the civic engagement absolutely ratchets that definition up because people can define it. And Robert Putnam of the Bowling Alone fame, if you remember him, wrote a book about bowling alone. He's big on this join or die now. That, I mean, his next level was if you do not, communities that where people are not joining in groups, suffer not only on a civic engagement level, but on an interactive level, which builds community and leads you to civic activity. There's a lady here.
And since you brought up Robert Putnam and Bowling Alone,
Yes.
another observation Putnam makes is that people who are engaged in their community in almost any way you can think of, coaching youth sports, attending religious services, they are far more likely to be newspaper readers than people who are not involved in the community.
I wanted to say that when the library was trying to build a new library, one of the Wayland Middle School teachers spoke up and said, "We don't teach civics anymore." And that's definitely lacking. Also, I wanted to point out that our high school has won several awards for their newspaper. And there is a voters, Wayland Voters E, I believe it's called, which goes to the various meetings and reports on them, picks out the highlights, but also gives you the website where you can go. Tells you it's like 40 minutes and 35 seconds in, so you can actually hear what's being said. If we could combine all these groups together, we would have a terrific place. But I also want to say that it's time-consuming, as you said, very hard for the average citizen who is trying to have a family and mow the lawn and get to the sports and everything else to take time to find out all this information so that they say, like you said, "Oh, what's going on here? I didn't know about this." And then it's too late.
Sometimes I think the condo model, I live in a condo, eight unit condo, so people have different tasks, and sometimes we rotate when something comes up, like one of our members is really like right on those meetings, because we have some important things going on in our neighborhood, so she's always on the meetings and alerting us to that, and then somebody else will take another task. I guess we just have to spread it out, because you're not going to do it if you think that you have to do all of it.
Oh, okay, so my name's Ann, and I live in West Concord, and I just wanted to say, I think the new paradigm is the nonprofit newspaper. The Concord Bridge that you mentioned came out about a year and a half ago, and I've seen that paper comes out online, and it's delivered for free to every resident and every business. And what I've seen is it's really brought people together. It's really a new venue. What I've also seen is I work with a little art studio in West Concord. They publish our public calls for art, and amazing things happen. People from Duxbury come with their work to have it shown in the Concord Public Library in West Concord. Why? They saw it in the Concord Bridge. So what I've seen firsthand is how a newspaper in paper and online, the new nonprofit way, can really bring people together, and we need that more than ever. Thank you for doing this.
Hi, my name is Ann too, and I love that for Concord. And my daughter lives in Carlisle, and they have a small Carlisle Mosquito, which comes out weekly, which is a wonderful little paper too. So that's very promising. But my question is, I'm I guess, very left-leaning centrist, you might say, but I've become, very aware lately that my news consumption has, I feel concerned because I feel like I've become a little addicted to outrage. And, on the left, MSNBC, it's like I want to get my daily fix of, Brian Tyler Cohen or something, and I realize that that's not really healthy, so I've been trying to push myself in a slightly different direction and have subscribed to the Bulwark and some other sort of more centrist or even right-leaning publications. So I wondered if you could give any recommendations, for people like me, and you may not, like I'm an Atlantic, New Yorker reader, but it's like watching Fox to me is like a bridge too far, but I can't do that. But I would really love some recommendations for some more centrist, truthful, journalism, if you could do that for me. Thanks.
I've been, at one point I had a list, and then my list went away because a lot of things changed. And now I find sometimes I have to just track the journalists and where they have gone. So I'm not going to be very useful. Should have anticipated this. Years ago, somebody did what, and I said to myself, I'm going to replicate this and never have, what I thought was an excellent question. They asked young conservatives and these are self-anointed, and young self-anointed liberals to recommend someone on the other side. And that was 100 years ago. Now they'd be older. But I thought, wow, that's a really good exercise because first of all, it suggests that these are people who are paying attention to the other side, and whether they agree or not, they have some respect. And I think the question was posed, whose opinions and reporting you respect, and there were lists there. This is why the whole Ronna Daniels thing became really ugly, because that was unnecessary. There are some people out here who can do commentary on the conservative side that were not denying there was an election. Okay, so that's why that went crazy. If people are not familiar with, that just blew up at NBC. They hired her for about a hot minute. The former chair of the RNC.
1/3 of a Scaramucci.
That's right. There you go. I think the prediction or the assumption is that she was to be paid $300,000, which I know she will get. So she'll get paid out for about 2 minutes. And the journalists inside NBC lost their minds, and other people outside NBC lost their minds. As was said, there's one thing to actually have someone who represents a different viewpoint, even a different party, if that's what you want to, if that's where you're going, but to deny the factual, the factual happening of the biggest civic event of our lives, come on now. And for her to say, after she got the job, oh, well, I didn't really mean it. Oh, really? That was a lot. So let me be thoughtful about that. And I'm happy to send to Chris and Amy after I be thoughtful about it, because right off the top of my head, I don't think I can come up with it. And I'll make Dan do it too.
Well, first of all, friends don't let friends watch cable news. Any of it. MSNBC may be a whole lot more truthful than Fox News, but it's the same business model. It's to keep you angry and upset so that you don't touch that dial. CNN is in the midst of its third reinvention in the last 2 years, I think, and we'll see where that ends up. I'm going to make, I think that Trump has kind of blown up the whole idea of you should consult a range of sources, because you don't want to be consulting stuff that just isn't truthful. And that is a real problem. So then you tap into some of the never-Trump conservatives, like you mentioned that you're looking at the Bulwark. I enjoy them too, but it's not that much different from reading our fellow liberals, right? I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations. First of all, I have found that I've been trying to spend maybe 20 minutes a day with the Christian Science Monitor, which is just an excellent, excellent news source. They've gotten awfully small. They're kind of down to just a daily newsletter at this point, but the quality is very high. And they have this solutions orientation so that you don't come away from the Monitor feeling like there's no hope. Is there a bridge nearby that I can jump on? And then the other one is you can stay away from the editorial page if you like, because it can be a little bit nutty. But the Wall Street Journal is really, really good. They did a tremendous story just yesterday on how Elon Musk's dysfunction has had a terrible effect on Tesla. which was just a really good, well-reported story.
You know, BuzzFeed, and it's a shadow of itself now, at one point, and you can probably maybe go back in the digital files and see it, at the end of certain pieces that the reporter would assess folks would have definite ends of spectrum ideas about, they would say, here are some other sources outside your bubble at the end of it. So there also may be names of people they referred to at the end of those stories, because they were trying to offer a broader palette for folks who were trying, you know, and unaware of it. And by the way, one of the issues yesterday on that panel about AI and tech, the whole intentionality is to make you angry and upset and to react in the moment. So that's why Maria Ressa was saying, you gotta slow down and do not react in the moment and just think about what's happening.
Back here.
Were there cameras in there? Yes, yes. Actually, you know what? Because President Johnson said, my mind is exploding, I need to go back and look at the tape. So yes, it should be posted sometime. It was incredible. I highly recommend it.
So I am getting a signal. I don't know. I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask our person with the clock one more question or wrap it up. One more. Okay, we can take one more question.
Two more questions. So we're talking about different news media organizations. I hate the sound of my own voice. And we're talking about how it's hard to look across the aisle because it's designed for outrage, and we're at the point where we can't even agree on what the facts are. We can't even agree that there's a tree outside. So how do we get back to agreeing that there is a tree, and we can both see the tree, and you may not like the tree, and I may wish the tree had flowers, or we may both want the tree to grow further. We may have the same long-term goal, and just like politics, we used to just disagree on how to get to the end goal. We wanted America to be great. We wanted the country to be good and people to be happy, but we used to disagree on how to get there, and now we can't even agree that there's a tree outside. So where do we go from here, and what is the news's role, the news media's role in that? Specifically, I guess, I've lost my train of thought.
That was a good question.
It was good.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm going to steal from yesterday's forum, sorry. One of our alum is Michelle O. She's a physician. She's in the Georgia legislature. I believe she's the only woman during 2020. She's Asian. And she told a story about, because part of this is about talking across difference. And she's very, very concerned about gun issues in Georgia. Let's repeat. And so she thought, and she's a physician, how can I reach across the aisle? I have no numbers. You gotta have somebody on my side if I want to get anything put through. So she said, one of the issues I know we have in common is safety. Now, we can disagree about some issues around safety, she said, but I'm gonna bet that everybody feels strongly about keeping guns out of the hands of children, protecting children from, errant interaction with guns. So she came up with something that she called the Pediatric Gun Safety Storage Act. And guess what? All those guys on the other side, guys, and very hard right Republicans, I agree with that. And they worked together on it, and the bill got passed. So she said, now it didn't take 2 days, even 2 years. We had to work on that. And we had to be get to the point where we could be in the same space, and I'm not suspiciously looking at you, and you're not suspiciously looking at me. But our point was, along the way, there are just some commonalities that we have, and we just got to go there first. Danielle Allen said something about what she institutes in her classroom, because they have many vigorous disagreements. Everyone must use everyone's name. You're not allowed to say, well, you said, no. And then before you can give your response to whomever you're addressing by name, you must repeat what you think they heard, what they said, which, as you know, is a marriage counselor thing, you know? And then you have to keep repeating it until the other person says, yes, that's what I said. Because 9 times out of 10, so much of the polarization and the cynicism and the distrust has come from what people thought they heard, and that's not what was said. If I could tell you how many people have written me nasty letters, I don't know why you said, I never said that. And in my case, I usually have a script to say, here's what I said. Oh, they say afterwards. But, you know, who has a chance to do that? So this is a way of beginning to, these are small things, but ways in which to begin to have conversation where we can both agree at the end. Yes, I did say there was a tree out there, and yes, you're going to say with me, there's a tree outside. We got to start there, and we can disagree about what we should do with the tree, but we have got to find some common ground, and I believe we can do that beginning with accepting the fact that there's a tree outside. So these are the small things that we do on a one-to-one basis, and just begin to have a conversation about it. What we do in the news media, or what I hope that we do in the news media, is constantly provide all perspectives. There are many perspectives, there is one truth. And I am such a proponent of that. And I want, often sometimes when certain people are not at the table, all those perspectives are not there. So I work hard to make sure that everybody's at the table so we can have those perspectives. And then you can decide, as the news consumer, where you are on the issue. But at least you have the opportunity to begin to form how you think about it. We present you the truth, but through the lens of many perspectives.
Building on what Callie said, one of my hopes is that by rebuilding local news, we can rebuild the basis for people cooperating and understanding each other and finding that there are ways that they can work together. There's an old saying that there's no Republican or Democratic way to plow the streets or pick up the garbage. People just want the streets plowed and the garbage picked up. The concern is that people are so immersed in national news these days, and especially polarized local news, that you have people showing up at school committee meetings, and what they should be asking about is, what can we do to get our math scores up, or do we have enough funding in place for the teacher's contract, those sorts of things. Instead, they're yelling about Fox News-driven issues like critical race theory and transgender.
Which doesn't exist in schools.
And transgender rights and that sort of thing. And these are not issues for local school committees. But people have been, it's not that people aren't interested in the news, it's that they turn the TV on and this is what they're getting. So again, by rebuilding local news, we may be able to overcome that. And once you find out that you can work with your Trump-supporting neighbor on some local issues, maybe you can find this common ground on other things as well. So I'm either being told to stop or to slash my throat. I'm not sure which. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I've been asked by a member of the audience to plug something that I think is apropos because it's related. And you may know, but there's the Human Rights, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, or the HRDEIC, and the Wayland Select Board is sponsoring a community event on April 28th from 1 to 7 p.m. It's a Sunday, by the way. It's called the Wayland Spirit of Community Interactive Workshop. So it will include small group dialogues, a light dinner, solution planning, and prioritizing. So, you know, if you're looking for solutions to the siloing effect of the dearth of local media, et cetera, perhaps that would be an opportunity to have kind of a conversation. It takes place at Wayland High School, again, on April 28th from 1 to 7 p.m. And you can email spiritquestions@wayland.ma.us. Now, thank you for coming, and we're having a light refreshment reception after, so please thank our guests again and join us.